I want to bring up your first comedian. He's one of the best in town. You can see him doing stand-up all over town. He hosts Young Persons Radio on Radio Free Brooklyn every Sunday. Give it up for Colby Smith!
All right. Keep it going for Matt Strickland, everybody. All right. What's up, you bunch of fucking bookworms? It's a pleasure for me to be here at Caveat tonight. Very excited to be at Caveat, a venue for people who are sick of comedy being so funny. I don't want to laugh. I want to learn. Honestly, I can't believe so many of you came out to the show tonight. I mean, shouldn't you be somewhere forcing the workforce of a mid-level media company to unionize? Yeah. We're all lefties here. But I'm not here to roast you. No, someday I'll get my whale. I'm here to roast who? That's right. The Lost Generation. This is a group of writers who all lived and worked together at Paris in the 1920s. You had people like Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and of course, Owen Wilson. This is a reference to the movie Midnight in Paris, which is a great movie about how life can sometimes be minorly inconvenient for white people. Anyway, Paris in the 20s. World War I had just happened, and everyone was so confident that nothing bad would ever happen again. They were very excited to make a new culture and literally rebuild the city. I mean, just imagine living in Paris in the 20s, strolling down the Seine, running into Hemingway, or going to parties with F. Scott Fitzgerald and James Joyce. It's almost as if God knew that English majors were going to have a really hard time finding a job and just wanted to give them something to romanticize. Gotta have something. Now, a large portion of these writers were Americans who moved to Paris to live and work and write together, which essentially makes them the first millennial gentrifiers of a major urban space. I mean, we'll do a real quick quiz. Is this, well, that just gave it away, fantastic. Is this a sleepy-eyed hipster boarding the L train at Morgan Avenue who comes from a rich family, but don't worry, he's really into DSA? Or is it celebrated American poet Ezra Pound? And as the slide was supposed to reveal just now, we're in Pound Town, baby. Ezra Pound looks like he's dying to tell you about Father John Misty. He also kind of looks like Kevin Kline, but like a Kevin Kline who fucks. So whiteys like Ezra Pound were pouring into the poor neighborhoods of Paris, including the ringleader, Papa himself, Ernest Hemingway. There he is with his second wife, a 12-year-old boy. Everybody's looking flash. Ernest Hemingway, as we all know, wrote The Sun Also Rises, which a lot of people don't know is actually the sequel to an early Hemingway short story called I'm Pretty Sure the Sun Only Sets, but let me do some research and get back to you. He later wrote A Farewell to Arms later in life, as well as its sequel, and Kiss Your Legs Goodbye Too. That one goes out to the woman shaking her head after that. Now, Ezra Pound and Ernest Hemingway were best friends, and together they did a very cool thing. They raised enough money among the artists and writers in Paris to send to T.S. Eliot, who was working at a bank in London. They gave him all this money so he could quit the job at the bank and write full time. And I, for one, thank God that they did, because if they had not done that, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot would never have written The Wasteland, and college freshmen would have no idea what to get tattoos of. That's a big poem. I would now like to use this part of the set to dispel this notion that writers operate on some kind of like higher plane than the rest of us. Because Ernest Hemingway was nothing if not a macho dolt who was into boxing, hunting, and war. If Hemingway had a Twitter today and we looked at his likes, it would just be page after page of those like hot blondes posing with M16s. He is not a complicated man. What he did do was memorialize this time period in his memoir, A Movable Feast, which, as he often did, writes with both the rhythm and vocabulary of a 6-year-old asked what he did over Christmas break. And we're like, oh, he's revolutionary. He's a true innovator. These are the first lines of A Movable Feast. Then there was the bad weather. It would come in one day when the fall was over. Yeah, it's called winter, you idiot. Spend less time writing books. Sounds like you need to read one, okay? But I'm sure, this is just the first couple lines. He's probably just getting warmed up. I'm sure we're about to get, very stark, beautiful depictions of Paris at this time. Paragraph 2. The squat toilets of the old apartment houses emptied into cesspools which were emptied by pumping into horse-drawn tank wagons at night. In the summertime, with all the windows open, we could hear the pumping and the odor was very strong. Paris smelled like shit all the time. He starts the book this way. The first 2 things he tells us in A Movable Feast are 1, winter exists, and 2, Paris smelled like shit all the time. And we're still just like, oh my God, Paris in the 20s, it must be so nice. No one had a phone. I want to get that out of there. All right, so he left Paris in 1928 and lived in America until he committed suicide in 1961. He famously, and this is true, bought the shotgun with which he shot himself at Abercrombie & Fitch, which was, at the time, a camping supply store that sold guns. So the next time you're in the market for a cool denim jacket and you're wondering where you should buy it from, just remember that if it weren't for Abercrombie & Fitch, Hemingway might still be alive today. He had 2 best friends. The other one was this man, F. Scott Fitzgerald. F. Scott Fitzgerald looks like if Herschel backpacks were a person. In this particular photo, I think he looks like a designed for an American Girl doll that got rejected for looking too Aryan. He lived somewhat of a charmed life. He was born to very upper-class parents. He was a relative of Francis Scott Key, the poet who wrote the national anthem. He attended private Catholic schools all through growing up and then graduated from Princeton. I swear to God, if this guy were any more privileged, he'd have a degree from NYU. I'll fight Ollie after the show. Hemingway only talks about F. Scott Fitzgerald briefly in the book, although they were like very close. The best story he tells about Fitzgerald is that Fitzgerald came to him very upset one day that his girlfriend had called his penis small. And Hemingway, in his generosity of spirit, said, I know exactly what to do for my friend Scott. He goes, come with me, Scott. We're going to go to a museum. We're going to look at the statues, the nude male statues in that museum, and compare their penises to yours. They do this. Scott feels better about himself. And the last line of that chapter is something like, but mine was still bigger than all of them. He's a very good friend. You know, Ernest Hemingway, he is to literature what Matt Strickland is to comedy. He has done some great work, sure, but his terrible personality is what we remember. Guys, I'm Colby Smith. Thanks for everything. Get Matt back up here.